Guess what I'm drinking?
Yeah.
Fiji water.
I know. No fair.
You know, hey, you know why?
I know.
Because a really smart guy said we should. No, I had heard that on before.
Yeah. I was thinking when I listened back to the podcast, it's sometimes hard to hear what Dr. Exley was enunciating, some of the time. And
really?
So I just wanted the...
You mean for you, for the untrained
for me.
ear.
Yeah, for the
See, when you do accents like me, like the English accent, when you do it so well, it's like my native language. So
he was advising people to drink water that has silicic acid. I put a link to basically an article on his website, specifically like how to find a water that has the right silicic acid in it.
And he did say, because I asked him at the end of this off the air, that you cannot just add silica to your water, because I did that recently. I went and bought a silica concentrate to add to mineralized water that we got from, filtered mineralized water. And he said, you can't do it that way. It has to really come naturally in the certain amounts and the ratios, the dynamic ratios that they have.
Yeah. So if you go to the resources on that episode, you'll see a link to something specifically that says how to choose a water that has the right silicic acid in it. And I'm going to start. You've already started, and I've wanted to go to the store, and
I win.
Yeah.
But who's keeping score? 297 to 3.
You literally have tally marks on your piece of paper there. The show Melissa in one column, Bob in the other column.
Let's just say one side is heavily marked, and one side just has a few little things on a day I wasn't myself.
That's really funny.
Okay.
Well, we never really started the show, but we're just kind of chatting. But
let's do that, and then I have a couple things I want to talk about.
Okay.
Before we start.
Okay. Well, me too.
Ready? Okay, go.
When you open the door for somebody else.
Welcome, everybody, to the Vaccine Conversation with Melissa and Dr. Bob.
How come you always get to do it?
Well, you sort of nod at me like,
is this like part of the patriarchal society that we live in? Is that what's going on here? You're
like, Dr. Bob, you're in charge. You go ahead and start the show.
Of course, you should go. You're the man. Please, I will step back and let you take the lead. Of course, anybody who's listened to this podcast is like,
yeah, not quite.
You're not
That's
telling
really
the truth.
funny. Well, I want to say, guess where I just was?
I don't
last
actually
week.
know. Oh, I don't know the answer to that from today. Last week,
I was in North Carolina. Woohoo!
For vacation, just for
vacation
in winter.
No, I flew out there. Cheryl and I flew out there to enjoy the birth of our very first grandchild. Yeah, your granddaughter,
right.
Little Beatrice, and we were totally thrilled. It was amazing. It is like super amazing to just hold a little tiny baby in your arms for hours and hours, and while they sleep, while they're awake, just sit there and look at them. And
that isn't your full responsibility. That's the added bonus, right?
I know.
Because you get to just hold the baby and pass the baby back off.
Exactly.
And you don't have to do the grunt work.
Oh, I think the baby has a dirty diaper. Here you go, Dad.
You might as well learn now.
It was amazing. So yeah, she really stole my heart, and I got to really bond with her. And I'm going back out there in about a week from now again to see her again, and I might have to fly out there several times a month. No, probably several times a year at least. We want to be really connected. So that was very exciting. Super exciting.
Did you ask the baby if she wants you to fly out that much to be that connected? I mean, doesn't she get a say in this?
No, she does not. No, someone told me, who was I talking to? I was talking to someone today who just had their first grandchild like a year ago, and he said that she's going to look at you like you are a superhero. Just that's how little kids look at their grandparents, hopefully. So that was totally awesome, like way awesome.
Well, that is so cool. I bet everybody listening is very excited for you as well. There was something else I wanted to tell you, but I forgot. So, Okay, two things. First thing, let's talk about the podcast tour again.
Okay. Right. Well, can I say the first thing about the podcast tour?
Oh my God, you just had a chance to say your first thing.
The fundraiser we announced last time, hey, we're having a fundraiser on February 22nd. We are moving that to May 1st.
Cool, exciting. We can update people online.
So we're having one on February 29th for sure in LA, but the one down here in Orange County has been moved to May 1st, just so people know.
Honestly, the majority of our listeners are not in Southern California. So they would not be able to attend. So, that really just is a handful of people.
Yeah.
But
what was the first thing you wanted to talk about, Melissa?
Thank you. Can I just complete a thought, Dr. Bob? So the podcast tour. Okay. Let's talk. Let's break this down for a second. We have, as we already announced, come up with 11 locations, 11 stops for us for live podcasting events. And we are in the process right now with Northern California and with Texas, as well as the New York and New Jersey team. And I haven't gotten to Connecticut yet, to creating and facilitating the process of where are we going to be? What's the best city? Let's get a team on the ground to get this happening. And it's getting exciting because it's more real, So why don't we list all 10 now?
Okay.
We have Northern California, Texas, New York / New Jersey, which may possibly turn into 2 different days, and then Connecticut. So it might be a 3-day weekend that time. Okay. I'll fill you in on that later. Okay. So those are our first 4 that we announced. Okay. After that, I'm going to bring up our next locations for you guys so that you have them, because people are messaging me and I've been answering this in private messages. So I might as well just say it out now.
Right.
So April, we have 4 different locations in April. We have Florida. We're hitting you first around April 18th, and Georgia, you are next, April 19th. So if you're in those 2 states, I hope you're jumping up and down right now.
We should do it just right on the Florida-Georgia line. Just like one talk.
Just do one and be like,
okay, for all you country music fans out there, Florida, Georgia line, right? Yeah. No, Melissa. Okay. No, so that was lost on Melissa, you guys. Sorry.
Super lost.
She can do the accent, but she doesn't listen to the music. Okay.
I can do the accent. Okay. So that's April 18th and 19th, Florida and Georgia. The 25th and 26th is a really busy and exciting informed consent weekend because we're going to be hitting Washington first, and I know you guys are ready for us. And then we're going to hit Oregon, and they're having that conference in between the 2 days we're going to do. So we're going to hit Washington, visit the conference, and then do the next day in Oregon. Is looking like how it's going to be.
Yeah.
So that's April. So again, Florida, Georgia, Washington, Oregon, we got you covered. The last 3 locations we're going to hit, we're going to do SoCal. Of course, we can't forget SoCal. This is where we are. This is where we're from. We're going to do a nice big event sometime in May, about the 16th or 17th. We don't have the date narrowed down yet. And the final set of locations that we're going to be doing is going to be in June, because Dr. Bob has some graduations for his family in the month of May. So no traveling until June, the 19th or the 21st, somewhere in there, we're going to be hitting Michigan and Wisconsin. Wisconsin's going to be the Minnesota-Wisconsin border right there in Minneapolis. So we're going to try to kind of hit 3 different states in 2 locations. This is in June. There might be another conference that's going to be out there at that time that I haven't told you about yet, that they're going to try to coordinate us with, that we can try to match up at the same time. That's going to be a big event for like-minded people. So again, our 10 states, we're hitting California, Texas, New York, Connecticut, Florida, Georgia, Washington, Oregon, Michigan, and then Wisconsin, Minnesota border. Yep. And again, Jersey is kind of going to be next to New York. So somewhere in there. We are hitting, this is as much as we could kind of do this first time around. So I hope everybody that's from there is excited and they're starting to get their gears turning. What I want to say is we cannot do this without your help. So we've mentioned the fundraisers that we have here locally, but I know a lot of people would love to donate and have thought about it and are interested in what we're doing, interested in supporting this tour. And I think some people think, oh, maybe there's an event coming up near me, but it might not come up near you. So what I want to say is, Again, we cannot do this without you. So if you want us to come to these 10 states because you're one of them and you've been wanting to meet us and get connected with like-minded individuals and have this amazing live event where we can learn something, talk about research, science, interview great people, talk about local activists and what they're doing in your state and all those kinds of things, then we need your support. So if you're waiting for something to come up, don't wait anymore. Please donate. You can donate on our IEG website, immunityed.org or immunityeducationgroup.org. There is a Take Action button. It says Take Action and Donate now. That will tell you where you can go to donate. You can donate through PayPal as a tax write-off deduction. You can also donate through Venmo if you don't mind not having a tax write-off, which a lot of people don't. And if you want information on that, you can message me on Facebook or message us on IEG's Facebook. Every little bit makes a difference. And I think people think, oh, I don't have $20,000 to donate. Listen, we're doing this and cutting as many corners as we can, and we're trying to make this on a budget. We're asking for favors. This is not a price tag like other things in this community have been. Like, we're really cutting corners to make this the least amount that we would possibly need to make this happen. But I know you guys want us out there. I've had probably hundreds of messages over the last year and a half asking for us to come different places. So we're trying to make the effort to do that. This is the time we need to do it. This is the time the momentum is big. But we need your help. We cannot do this by ourselves because equipment is probably the biggest cost. Post-editing, again, there's going to be a movie. So there's so much that goes into this. We have to hire staff, filming staff. None of this is going to us. This is literally all going to the project. So if you believe in what we're doing, you believe in the project of this national podcast tour, if you're behind this project, please do not wait. Think of this as a good time to do a donation for your company or for your household that you can maybe be a write-off later for you in some other way down the line. We need your help. This needs to happen now. And please don't wait because we can't move forward continuing to book these locations without having the money there to actually make it happen. If you have questions on this or need more information on how you can donate or what you want to do as it relates to donating, we know you can sign up for recurring donations once a month.
Yeah, and I can just remind people how to do that. I guess, first of all, if you have your own PayPal account already, then you can do recurring donations on our website through your PayPal account. And then if you go to our podcast website, and you'll see that actually on our Immunity Ed donation page, you'll see a link to our podcast website, or it's also anchor.fm/thevaccineconversation/support. That's also on our summary words about each podcast episode. You'll see a bit.ly link that takes you to our, you'll see a support link that takes you to the support page. But I just want to give a shout out. I get emails every time we get a new supporter. I'm like so thrilled. I love, I'm hoping to meet each one of these people as we, go around the country. So, but I just want to thank, we have Jenna, Lisa, Sandra, Justine, Brooke, Christy, Rebecca, Christine, Dom, and Michelle, Cameron, and Erica. Those are all, they actually list them right on our own dashboard page and the monthly support. That so thrills me and I so appreciate it because we love having you guys as partners. And again, all of this is going to fund this project that we're creating that is going to be such an amazing tool for you to be able to show people for many years to come how to get the entire vaccine conversation all in a number of dedicated episodes that are going to be specifically geared towards the most important topics.
And before it's always been like icing on the cake, but unfortunately now it's not icing on the cake. It's actually a necessity. We need it. We don't have any big funders.
It's actually the cake.
Yeah, it's the cake, the grain-free cake. We don't have like people that are bankrolling us in any kind of way. And we don't have like pharma money like everybody else does on the other side of this. And so we really rely completely on you guys to make this happen. And of course, we're a little ambitious saying we're going to take a 10-state tour, but I know we can do this. I really believe in this project. This is like my passion project. Like, I'm so excited about this. I really want to be able to meet you guys and come see you and do this in person. The energy that you feel in these kinds of things is like unparalleled. It's so amazing. And so I want to create this and really connect this national thread. It's so important to me. So please help us do this. Every little bit helps, which means every little bit that you're able to do with all the listeners that we have, which by the way, we hit over 100,000 plays this month.
Yeah, I know. It's the first month that we broke 100,000.
Awesome. That's so amazing.
Yep.
So with all the listeners that we know we have, a little bit from everybody will be just what we need to get this done, finished, and moving forward. And don't worry, you're not going to see us in like new Armani clothing or something. You'll see me in my same like TJ Maxx outfits when I come meet you on tour. You can be sure of that. None of this is going to us, okay? Yeah. So just to be clear, everything goes to making this project happen. So please help us. I don't think people like really realize how much we sort of need it, but we do need it. And if you want us to come to you, this is the only way it's going to happen. Because if we don't have the money to rent the equipment or buy the equipment and get the staff members that we need to make this happen, it won't happen. And I know everybody would be so disappointed if all of a sudden this wasn't able to be, except for, I'm sure there's some people that I can think of that would be probably very excited if we do not do this podcast tour. And that's exactly why we have to do it, you guys. Yeah. We cannot falter and we cannot succumb to the pressures of this other side. We have got to keep educating. That's our goal. That's what I wanted to say.
Awesome.
And I guess I'll just wait to say my second thing as the beginning of the next episode. Okay. Since that took so long. So sorry.
I have one more thing too, and I'll just wait for the next
good.
episode.
You wait for yours and I'll wait for I'm going to write mine down right now.
No, actually I said all my 4 things.
Okay. Yeah. Oh my God. Well, see, there you go. All right. Not my fault. Anyway, back to today's topic.
Yeah.
Which, oh my God, a study suggested by Dr. Bob for once.
You guys, I think
this is like the first time. This may be like one of the first times that, because I said, let's do a study. I gave you some guidance on that one because I said, I want to break down, I like breaking down studies. Yeah. And then you said, here, you had a link. It was interesting. I'm like, oh my gosh, it's you. You're leading it. I love it.
You're welcome.
So why don't you tell everybody what this study's about?
Okay. Well, the study, of course, we will give you a link. But I even find the title of the study interesting because it's kind of a little.
It's very long.
It's very long, but it's kind of it's misleading. Like there's a very problematic finding that the study has in the conclusion, and the title doesn't even really tell you the truth about it.
Well, how else would it be published?
I know. So it's a randomized controlled trial of the safety and immunogenicity of tetanus, diphtheria, and acellular pertussis vaccine immunization during pregnancy and subsequent infant immune response.
Okay, let me translate that for everybody. Okay. So this is a study that's discussing women that are vaccinated with the Tdap vaccine, which is tetanus, diphtheria, and pertussis, while pregnant, and now they're recommending after 30 weeks. Originally, it used to be between 20 and 30 weeks. Now it's after 30 weeks. And then the subsequent response to infants as far as their ability to show antibodies.
Right, from mom's vaccination.
Yeah, right.
Right. But then it also looks at how infants respond to their own vaccination
the primary
as they
series.
go through the first year of life. So it's a very fascinating study.
And this is in Canada, right? And this was 2018.
Oh, beauty. Cool. Right.
This is done, I think, 2018. So it's new. This is actually, relatively new. And what did you think? What overall thoughts? Before we go into it.
Well, can I share like the finding that I was most excited about that kind of led me to this, or do you want to save that for the?
Oh, that's okay. Okay, go ahead.
Well, I mean for me the big gist of the study, besides just sort of pretending to do safety research, is that the study basically they gave like 200 and something moms, 273 moms either the Tdap vaccine or the tetanus diphtheria vaccine. They divided them in half, gave one half the whole Tdap, one half TD without whooping cough. And because they decided not to do an inert placebo. Because
shocker.
I know,
I'm so
shocker.
shocked. Right. Wait, are you serious? They tested a vaccine against a vaccine? That's
I know. So surprisingly, all the adverse events were equal in this individual group. No, but they wanted to specifically test what happens to people who just get a pertussis vaccination during pregnancy. What happens to the moms and what happens to the baby. They wanted that to be like the only difference. And they basically they measured the pertussis vaccine antibodies in the umbilical cord blood when the babies are born. And they tested, I think, the mom's antibodies as well, but that wasn't that big of a part of the study. And then they tested how the mom's antibodies from the pertussis vaccine, how long they lasted during infancy, when they peaked, and how they waned. And then they also tested the baby's own immune system response to the baby's vaccines at 2 months, 4 months, 6 months, and 12 months. And the reason they had to test this is we've always known that whenever a baby gets immunities from a mom, like through the womb, transplacental antibodies, whether it's a mom who had a natural disease like measles or chickenpox, or a mom who had a vaccination-induced immunity, the transplacental antibodies that float around in the baby and are supposed to protect the baby, those antibodies actually block the effectiveness of vaccines. Those antibodies reduce how effective the baby's own shots are going to be, because when the baby gets a shot and the baby starts to mount antibody response, mom's antibodies that are in the baby interfere with that. So the baby does not respond as well to a vaccine. And they wanted to see, they know that's true for measles and mumps and maybe rubella vaccine, and they know that's true for chickenpox. So moms who have had those diseases, that's why we don't give those vaccines to babies until they're 1 year old. We have to wait until all mom's antibodies have gone away so that the baby's own 1 year old vaccine will work. And that's why if we wait until 15 months to do an MMR vaccine, it works even better.
Right.
Because there's been 3 more months for mom's own natural antibodies to leave the baby.
And the mother's antibodies are still sufficient, though, to protect from something like measles,
right?
Right,
Yeah, right, exactly.
But is that not true for pertussis then?
Right. So for pertussis, they didn't know. They didn't know if any of mom's antibodies would interfere with the baby's own vaccines. And so that's what this study was designed to do. And they found, we'll tell you the details, but the gist of it is they found that yes, when a mom gets a Tdap vaccine, that the baby does get antibodies from the mom, from the vaccine, and the baby has, a pretty, certain level of antibody protection for the baby's first couple months of life. But then those mom's antibodies wane. But then when you give the baby his shots, the shot doesn't work as well. And you give the baby a second shot, and that shot doesn't work as well. And then by the third shot, the baby's vaccine kind of does work somewhat. But then by 12 months, the baby's own vaccine protection is low again. And then mom's antibodies even interfere slightly with how effective the 12-month booster dose is.
And even after 12 months, I think they mentioned. So just to break it down and summarize just in a couple lines, basically, and we're going to go through this, but basically what the study is saying is while there is antibody presence that is strong in infants that were born to mothers who had the vaccine during pregnancy in those first couple months. By 4 months and especially 6 months, the numbers start to plummet. And then when they're getting their own vaccines at 2 months, 4 months, and 6 months, their protection from their own vaccines is way less than the babies who were born to mothers that did not get that vaccine during pregnancy. So by 6 months, you have the babies for the mothers that had TD, which is not Tdap, and those mothers that did not have the pertussis component have babies with higher levels of protection from their own vaccines than the babies who have still gotten all the primary series of Tdaps, but their mother who was vaccinated during pregnancy, that interference, like you're saying, basically creates an inability, or what they say, blunting the immune system of the infant to where they are no longer really able to protect themselves from that point on. And this is a really super interesting finding, I think, because, the assumption is that vaccines only help you. And nobody's really talking about what happens if you get this one vaccine over here, but you have this sort of unintended consequence over here. And in the end, they try to come to a conclusion saying, well, it doesn't matter because in the first couple months, that's the most risky period of time. And so at least we're covering that point. But as we've seen over the last couple decades, as a society using acellular pertussis, we've got, the rise of pertussis now is back. And so is that really okay that this is now shifting that disease burden? Mortality might not be the issue, but again, it's only a handful of infants that really die from pertussis, even with the thousands and thousands of cases.
Right. It's roughly 10 infant fatalities every year.
And it could be 100,000 or more cases across the nation.
Yeah.
There's not like a very, very high mortality rate even then, but shifting that disease burden, we're seeing outbreaks now at all these different ages, several different intervals actually that we're seeing because this immunity is wearing off. What if a lot of these children don't have the ability to hold any antibody protection from the vaccine that they're getting, even 5 doses, 6 doses, all because their mother was vaccinated when they were pregnant and this baby was, as a fetus, having this intersection of, immune response coming from the mother and from them. And it basically, things got mixed up and it's affecting their ability to sort of protect themselves. This is a really interesting idea. And then what do you do with that?
I know. And it gives me sort of the conclusion that they really don't know what the heck they're doing.
Totally.
I mean, they make a vaccine. They give it to kids for many, many years, and they say, hey, well, let's just give it to pregnant women without even researching what it does, without even knowing whether it works.
Because this is new.
Right.
And they've been giving it to women during pregnancy now for, I want to say, close to 10 years as almost regular practice.
I forget when they started, honestly.
Because that other study I had was 2011. So, they were already discussing Tdap in pregnancy then.
Yes, but they just arbitrarily start doing these vaccines, like you said, thinking that all it can possibly do is good. There can't be any negative consequences. And then now we see a negative consequence. And they try to justify it by, kind of like you alluded to, is at least we're giving babies protection from the vaccine in the first 2 months of life before the baby can get his own vaccine. And they say it's okay that the baby's own vaccine then doesn't work as well, because they actually say almost all the fatalities occur in the first 3 months of a baby's life. So they say we're giving protection during that time, so it helps. So what I kind of wonder is, well, I mean, if the goal is to prevent fatality, and get mom getting the vaccine, if that's going to help prevent fatality, but then the baby's vaccines are not going to work very well, wouldn't it make more sense to just not even give the baby pertussis vaccines? Protect the babies with mom's vaccine in the first 2-3 months of life so the baby doesn't die, but then you're giving 5 doses of a vaccine that can cause a lot of severe reactions.
A triple antigen vaccine.
Yeah.
You're not just getting pertussis by itself. That's the thing that people forget. You cannot get pertussis vaccine by itself. So every single dose that you're getting, because you need the pertussis protection, because it wanes so quickly, you have to get 3 antigens every single time.
But they just don't know what they're doing. I wish they would just, come up with a vaccine idea and then don't implement it, study it for 10 years to make sure you're making the right call. And we actually have another study we're going to talk about a little later that actually shows another problem with whooping cough vaccine when we give it to kids directly. But I don't like these unintended consequences and then how they try to justify it, saying, oh, it's okay, the vaccine doesn't work very well later, at least we're giving babies protection early.
Well, what if too, they're not studying this because that was not the point of this particular study, but what if it's also affecting how well other vaccines are working for these infants?
Yeah, so they looked at antibody levels to Hib vaccine, and it did not impair, like the mom's pertussis vaccine did not impair baby's Hib immune response.
Did it show the other
and then they studied polio immune response, and I'm pretty sure it did not impact polio immune response either. I forget the actual number, but I'm pretty sure it did not impact polio. Although I don't see the data here, but that was one of the ones they studied. No, because there's specific, it has to be like disease specific. So mom's pertussis vaccine would only kind of inhibit the baby's pertussis response.
I just wonder over time is what I mean, like more like the idea that you've got this, again, intersection of immune response between maternal antibodies and now this artificially induced vaccine response, which again, it's artificial. You're supposed to be passing on your maternal antibodies and the baby's supposed to have that in those first 12 months. And so putting something else in line with that is creating a problem, because that's not sort of how nature was designed to work. And like I mentioned to you before we started rolling, I wonder too, with the infants that do die from pertussis, I'm really curious to find out how many of these babies, whether 9 or 10 of them or so on average, are breastfed. How many of these babies are breastfed and are given, protection from that, and how many of them are not breastfed and therefore are at more risk of suffering complications? Because we did an entire episode about breastfeeding and how it reduces risks of so many different diseases through the data. We showed that in season 1. My guess would be you're a lot more protected with that, and there would be a decreased risk of mortality with that alone. That's something to throw in here, but they never talk about that, and when we're discussing these types of things, all they talk about is whether or not the vaccine did anything. And remember, what was it, like several months ago, I told you I looked at the state data for California on the women that had been vaccinated with Tdap, and it was about 45% of pertussis cases in infants were coming from mothers who had been vaccinated.
Yeah.
It was like 40 to 45%.
Yeah.
So we're talking about a significant portion of those with pertussis, and these were infants, had mothers who were already vaccinated. So I have to clarify by saying that they're measuring antibody levels.
Right.
And you've said this before.
Mm-hmm.
I don't remember what episode, but I remember you talking about this. The presence of antibodies in the blood is not necessarily the same thing as proof of the ability for the body to mount an antibody response or a sufficient immune attack against that antigen or that bacteria, virus that comes into your body. This doesn't necessarily prove that these babies, if the pertussis bacteria got into their system, that these babies would be able to fight it off.
Right.
It's just measuring levels. There's the presence of antibodies.
Right.
And what they're estimating is a sufficient level. But there's really no data that actually shows that they were presented with it, they were exposed to it, and they fought it off. And we have no data that really shows any of that. So all this proof about why the Tdap is necessary during pregnancy is all based on this hypothesized idea that the presence of antibodies is going to be enough every single time if you're presented with it. And there's really no proof. I mean, in my eyes.
Yeah. And that is another thing that bugs me is again, they don't know what they're doing, because they're, again, assuming this vaccine can only do good. Mm-hmm. They're assuming if it gives a baby measurable antibodies, that those antibodies must be effective in preventing disease. What they have not done is proven that babies whose moms got Tdap during pregnancy have like a lower rate of pertussis and a lower mortality rate in the first few months of life. They've not proven that yet. And I think they should be required to prove that before they make this recommendation. And
because it's universal now.
I know. You know where it started? Do you remember where this recommendation came from?
Was it after the outbreak in California?
It was your friendly neighborhood California Public Health Department took it upon themselves to start recommending Tdap vaccine for all California pregnant women. It did not come from the CDC. It did not come from any sort of infectious disease, departments anywhere, or they didn't do like research and figure, hey, we need to do this. We had an outbreak of pertussis, and the public health department said, hey, we have this vaccine. We have no idea if it's safe for pregnant women. We have no idea if it's even going to work. Let's recommend it to everybody. And that's how it started in pregnancy. And then the CDC adopted it like 6 months later, and then it went nationwide. But imagine a public health department that has no knowledge of this vaccine safety or efficacy in pregnancy, making a recommendation like that. And we, the voters have given them the power and the authority to do that. And that's concerning, because we keep voting for senators and assembly people that are willing to give the public health department extra powers. And
I'm sure they did know that you're saying about efficacy. They didn't know about efficacy in pregnant women, but they sure knew, because everybody knows, it's very documented, that the efficacy of the Tdap vaccine is not very good.
Right.
At best, what I've seen is estimates about 80% at best. and it wanes. In some cases, within a year, you literally have no more protection. And so I feel like they continue to recommend this vaccine over and over because they're so familiar with the fact that it doesn't last. But what they don't tell you when they keep recommending it is that it doesn't last. They never say that.
I know.
I have never heard somebody go, well, the booster, like a commercial, the booster for the pertussis vaccine doesn't last long. So make sure and get it every 12 months. Nobody's saying it that it doesn't last long. They're just saying they do the scare tactics of, if a baby near you just is newborn, you all need to get this vaccine, or this baby could die, or it's the winter time and people are sick. You might have pertussis. This has been fatal. Like you could, your children could be at risk. You all need to get, like, everything becomes this very, very scary thing. What they're not telling you is the reason we're promoting this vaccine is because it wanes so quickly.
Right.
That's why we need you to keep getting it.
It'd be like getting a flu shot twice a year. It barely works, so let's just give it again.
But they're not being honest. That's the thing that really kills me. Is why not just be honest and say, you know what? This vaccine gives you a couple years of protection. That's about it, though. And so if you want to maintain that protection, you're going to have to keep getting your boosters. If you don't feel comfortable with that because of the safety risks, then do it once every 10 years or whatever it is. They don't just lay it out there for you. Instead, they make you feel shame or guilt if you're not one of the people hopping on board. And I realize they said in the study too, it doesn't matter the last time you were vaccinated, they still want you to get it during pregnancy.
I know. They want you to get it during every pregnancy.
Every pregnancy.
Every single pregnancy, with no safety research on that.
And they did not, by the way, these are not necessarily women who've ever had pertussis.
Right.
That was not like part of the process at the beginning to make sure, because it would be different if it was measles, right? Because if you would have had it, you'd have this protection. But that's one thing a lot of people don't know about pertussis is you can have pertussis and it does not have lifelong protection like any other wild infection might have. Like pertussis is one of the ones that you can get the wild infection and you still may not have immunity forever.
Right. You have pretty good immunity. Like if you get the natural disease and you've never been vaccinated, you actually will have some pretty good immunity. Definitely not lifelong.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe in rare cases lifelong, but you'll have way better immunity for many years, way better than the vaccine would give you. But yes, you can eventually catch it again, and it's kind of somewhat unpredictable. But we'll show you the next study eventually, but if you actually got the vaccine, you're actually more likely to get natural wild pertussis later in your life. But
I'm just curious how many of these women actually had pertussis and how that would have affected.
How that impacts things. I know.
Yeah, the maternal antibodies. I mean, that's the kind of study you want to see, right? Yeah. Oh, you had pertussis. How much protection when they measure the blood of your infant? How much protection was passed, and how long was that passed? And if you did decide to vaccinate that child later at 4 months or 6 months or later, how did that affect their ability to respond at that point? Or did you even need to? Like you're saying, do you even need to do the primary series if you have enough of that antibodies? I mean, I think it comes down to like the medical establishment basically thinking, we're going to vaccinate everybody and it's going to do exactly what happens when your body produces an immune response to a wild infection. It's going to be just the same. We're just going to make it happen versus it happening to you. And what nobody wants to admit is that these two things don't look anything alike. The response does not look the same.
Especially with this disease.
Yeah, especially with this.
Could you imagine if an OB or a midwife is counseling every pregnant woman, and if they were going to be truthful, the discussion would basically have to be, we have this vaccine for, Tdap vaccine for whooping cough. There's some safety research, but not much. We really have no idea what effect it's going to have on your unborn baby or after your baby's born. We know it'll produce antibodies. We know it'll make it less likely that you will catch whooping cough, now and after the baby's born. We know the baby will get antibodies, but we really don't know if those antibodies work. We don't know if it's really going to protect your baby, but we hope it will. Oh, and by the way, there is aluminum in it, and aluminum is a neurotoxin, but that's okay to inject into your unborn baby. And also, by the way, getting this vaccine, we now know, will make your baby's own whooping cough vaccines not work as well.
Could you imagine that
conversation?
Yeah,
could you imagine telling parents that?
Not even including, and by the way, there are all these adverse events that are associated with it for you as an adult, but also for your baby when they do go through their primary series.
Right. And by the way, there's formaldehyde and all kinds of other things in there. And but it's okay. There's not a single discussion of any of that. It's simply, here's the vaccine. It's going to save your baby's life.
You must take it. Yeah. Every woman that is going through traditional...
I'm bugged by this.
All these traditional OBs that you're going through now, every woman listening to this has been pressured, if not convinced, to get it. This is not an optional thing anymore. They are really pushing this as if this is what is required to maintain the standard of care to protect this infant and protect you. And there's really just no data to support that this is doing really anything that's worth it to require this universally. And then the big point of this study was basically comparing the immunogenicity of the infants, and again, the mothers as well, after vaccination as the baby is born and following that baby for even post 12 months. So I'm guessing maybe around 13 or 14 months, because they said just after the first, the 12-month booster. And their results were really interesting. And it's funny to look at the graphs too, because some of these graphs just plummet. But basically they're saying, these rates were high. They're high up until a certain point, 2 months, maybe they're peaking. And then by 4 months, there's not a significant increase over the other TD group anymore. And by 6 months, it is now dropping below. And by 7 months, they are significantly dropping. And so again, you've got infants whose mothers were not vaccinated, who've had their regular primary series of Tdap, that have higher levels of antibody response at 6 months and on than the mothers that were vaccinated with those infants. And again, this comes down to what's happening between the maternal antibody response and the infant antibody response to its own vaccines. It's not able to handle its own vaccines in a way that actually has success. And that means that child, by 4 months, technically 4 months and on, is now more susceptible to catching pertussis.
I was looking at these graphs. These graphs are the baby's antibody levels. And I didn't realize this, honestly, the first time, when I first looked at this study. It shows babies' antibodies to the pertussis toxin, other components of the pertussis germs. It basically shows when the baby's born, the baby has a certain level of pertussis antibodies from the vaccine. That level plummets. Yeah. That line is a sharp curve that goes almost to nothing by the time the baby's 2 months old.
Right.
And then the baby gets their own vaccine at 2 months. They don't even get any antibodies after their first vaccine. The antibodies keep dropping, which is really shocking to me. And then after the 4-month vaccine, the antibodies start to climb, but the antibodies don't even get that high again until after the 6-month vaccine.
And then what happens after that?
And then it plummets. It drops dramatically after the 6-month vaccine.
In just a month, which means you have a month of protection, not even.
Yeah, and what's interesting is the babies whose moms did not get Tdap vaccine, just got the tetanus diphtheria vaccine. The baby's responses to the pertussis vaccine, their own shot, they get the shot at 2 months, their antibodies start to go up, not down like the Tdap babies. Their antibodies go up, and they go up higher, and they go up faster after their 4-month vaccine than the babies whose moms got Tdap. So it's really showing some very, very clear interference. Again, these graphs on the 5th or 6th page of the study, it shows very significant interference where the baby is getting almost very little protection until they get that 6-month dose. Again, so it calls into question. Babies are born with immunity, but that immunity is cut in half almost by the time they're 1 month. and then it's super low by the time they're 2 months, and they don't have any good immunity until the 6-month dose.
And then it drops a month later. It's all the way back down again.
Yeah. So to me, this is very problematic in that, I mean, if this was a harmless vaccine, that would be one thing. But this one vaccine is known to cause seizures. It's known to cause encephalitis, even rare encephalopathy. It's known to cause nerve injuries. This vaccine is just one of the ones with the highest side effects for babies. And now we're giving, the fact that we're giving it to moms is making the vaccine just not even work as well. So it was maybe questionable benefit, like risk benefit analysis before. But now that you're getting even less efficacy from the vaccine, that even shifts that equation even more.
But no benefit.
Even more towards the side of maybe questioning, is this even beneficial to you? So
they do mention too that basically the mother's antibody levels by 12 months are steady decline. Like before the 1 year period, her protection is down to almost nothing. And they do mention several other studies that have the same conclusion as it relates to adults and waning immunity. Waning immunity for pertussis is such an issue. It's an issue with older children. It's an issue with teens. It's an issue with adults. Like people don't realize, but your protection level is so short. And you're accepting the risk, the full risk for very short protection. I don't think the public knows this. I think the public assumes I'm getting my booster, I'm going to be good for several years. But you're not, and they're not telling you that. And then you're accepting the risk every single time. What if you had to get it every year to have protection? I mean, could you imagine the toxic load on your body after 20 years of yearly Tdaps? Because you guys, you cannot get the pertussis vaccine by itself. So if you wanted that protection, even if you voluntarily chose it, knowing the risks, you would still have to get a triple antigen every single time.
I know, and realize that the tetanus diphtheria vaccine was only approved to be given as a booster every 7 to 10 years. That's how they approved it in their safety research, and that's all you need. Now they're wanting pregnant women to get a Tdap
every single time.
Yeah, which could be every year and a half, every 2 years.
This
if
goes
you're
back
having
to
a
my
lot of
whole
babies.
wonder about hyperimmunity and what happens when you have too much of something. You already have enough antibodies for tetanus or diphtheria, and now you continue to give it extra only because you're trying to get the pertussis component, and you can't get it any other way. Same thing with MMR. Same thing. It's like you want to get measles vaccine, you can't get it by itself. You have to get these other things. What if you already had some of these other things as a child naturally, and now you have to have this MMR as the only vaccine you can get for measles protection in order to go to school or to follow your state laws? And what does that do to the body when there is too much immunity, too many antibodies, too much immune response? I feel like there's definitely a story there that nobody's really covering. I think we should probably do a podcast maybe on hyperimmunity, this idea of hyperimmunity. So blunting the immune system. Do you remember when was it a year ago that the other side threw out the article about having the wild measles vaccine, the wild measles virus actually makes you have that immune amnesia. Remember when that came out and that was all over every news network, right? Because they have the ability to do this. If the roles were reversed here so the side with all the money and media access found a study that showed this, the blunted immune shows it doesn't even work well. This would be on every news station saying you're getting 4 vaccines, 4 triple antigens. So essentially 12 vaccines in your first year that may not be doing anything for you because your mother got the Tdap when you were pregnant.
Right.
That's a big story.
It's
a big deal.
Yeah. Whenever we find out a pharmaceutical company has made a mistake with one of their medications, or their medication is causing harm or is causing some negative effects.
After 200 people die before we have to find that out?
And that's all over the news, and it's a big deal, and everyone's very, very happy to report it. But not so with vaccines. Every time there's a problem discovered with vaccines, I didn't know about this study. Yeah. This study is over a year old, and I came across this study because I was reading something else about whooping cough, and this just kind of showed up as a related article. And I was like, wow, how did that go by without anyone noticing.
Well, this quote tells me everything. The clinical significance of the blunted immune system response to pertussis antigens in infants of mothers immunized with Tdap is unclear.
Right.
It's 2018, yes. And guess what, folks? This is unclear still.
Yeah.
We have been recommending universal vaccination for all pregnant women in the United States since about 2010, 2011. We're now 10 years into that, and they still don't know crap. I mean, think about that. Think about that statement. First of all, this study just showed us there's such thing as a blunted immune system. Okay, so we know it's a thing now.
Right. Yeah.
But what it's telling you is the significance of the fact that we know this now is unclear.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, shouldn't this stuff be clear? My first beep moment. Sorry, guys. Shouldn't this be clear before they are universally recommending it? Can we just have agreement on that?
I know. That's what I was saying earlier. And you'll find that statement in any vaccine research study where they find a problem. Instead of saying, well, this could be a problem. They always say.
We mistakenly,
The significance of this is unclear. We're going to have to, do another study to look at that. And they're not going to, of course. But it's like science speak for, oh, no, we found a problem, but don't worry, everybody. It's not clear what that problem is.
But we're not allowed to say what that problem is. And so they do say some of the limitations of the study are that they were not able to really detect quote unquote rare adverse events following immunization, which means for the infants, or adverse pregnancy outcomes. They were not powered. The study was not powered to detect these. So if you look at the chart that they list for adverse events, again, it's soreness at the injection site, headache, fever, very mild things. And it has a nice little chart to be like, oh, 2 people had this, 10 people had this. It doesn't have the other things like that we know exist. And they're not even looking for those things is what they're saying. They're not looking for those types of things. And then they also say, at the end here, it says, finally, it is not known at what age in early childhood the antibody blunting effect disappears. They don't know what age this stops. This could be going on for several years, maybe forever. It said ongoing surveillance of pertussis in early childhood is needed when maternal immunization programs are implemented. Well, they've been implemented 10 years ago. So where is the surveillance of pertussis in early childhood to see what's happening to mothers that had the vaccine and how that's affected their ability to wear it, to hold it off? We don't know. And what this study is saying is we should know. we should probably try to find this out, guys. Yeah. It's unclear. But immunization's important, and every pregnant woman should go get their Tdap. Yes. That's what's so funny about all of this is like the takeaway of all these things is like, it's working. It works. Yes. It's not until you look through all the fine print where you're like realizing, well, I don't know. It works for this element and then totally jacks up this element over here. But it's like, I always think of the vaccine program like whack-a-mole. It's like, we're going to stop the incidence of disease of measles. We're going to stop the incidence of cases. But what they don't think about is the fact that now that the burden has now, the burden of disease has shifted to infants and adults now. And now the answer is to just blame everybody who's not getting vaccinated elsewhere, thinking if we get those numbers high enough, we'll be able to somehow protect these 2 new groups of people that are stuck dealing with this because of what we did over here. And it just feels like everything is, let's react now by just solving this one problem, and nobody's stepping back and being objective enough to see what's going to happen after that. What's the domino effect to this one thing you're going to adjust? Because as we know, nature is a very complex thing. And every time you mess with one area, it's like other stuff keeps popping up. Yep. And this is a perfect example of one of those scenarios that I've seen. Your target is over here. So you think you're successful. You call it a success. And what you do is just kind of damage control the rest of the stuff that comes up. I hope nobody notices about it. I'm sure there are dozens of examples of this exact type of thing.
Yep.
But this was a new study, 2018, with the longest title I've ever seen. So if you're interested, we'll have a link to it on the website. And always feel free to comment if I post about it or you post about this, like comment back with your thoughts on it. I know it's a little bit complicated. This is a lot more technical than some of the stuff we usually go into, but we like to bring you all things and read it for yourself, get an idea of what you think about it, and check all the references and all the other studies that they're referencing, because, that gives a lot of additional data and supplementary information.
Yeah. Can I mention the other study briefly, because it's kind of a brief discussion?
We have talked about this.
Right. Yeah, we talked about this last year. We talked about it last year, but I want to highlight it because it really sort of plays into the major problem with the acellular whooping cough vaccine, the vaccine we've been using since the mid-90s. And it might kind of explain, why the vaccine is not working very well. And I'll just allude to it briefly. The study is called the 112-year odyssey of pertussis and pertussis vaccines, mistakes made and implications for the future. And this is by Dr. James Cherry, who is literally one of the grandfathers of pediatric infectious disease. He spent his whole life researching and working on whooping cough vaccines. And he's at UCLA. He's very well respected. He wrote like one of the, I think is very instrumental in all the, authoring all the pediatric infectious disease textbooks and
very pro-vaccine.
Very, very pro-vaccine. So he wrote an article that basically just talks in a lot of detail about the problems with whooping cough vaccine. But one of his conclusions is very concerning to me. And he says, because of something called linked epitope suppression, all children who are given DTaP vaccines will be more susceptible to pertussis throughout their lifetimes. And there's no easy way to decrease this increased lifetime susceptibility. He says since 1997, the DTaP vaccination policy has created a cohort of people, the number of which is expanding every year, who are more susceptible now to repeated clinical illness with pertussis infection compared to all the kids who used to get the old whole cell pertussis vaccine. And there's no way to make this cohort less susceptible. He's basically saying everyone who's getting those 6 doses of Tdap vaccine throughout childhood, including now all the pregnant women getting Tdap vaccine, that is literally making you more susceptible to catching pertussis throughout the entire rest of your life.
Right.
And the reason, I'll try to explain it briefly, but the concept is called linked epitope suppression. It basically means that when you get an acellular pertussis vaccine, you're getting like 5 antigens, a very low number of antigens. And so your body's developing immune response to those 5 antigens. So you have immunity to those, right? But the pertussis germ has I don't know if it's hundreds or even thousands of different antigens. So when you get infected later with a pertussis germ, your immunity that you build artificially to the vaccine somehow actually stops your immune system from generating natural antibodies against those same proteins in the natural germ that's just infected you. So you therefore can't mount a good immune response to the natural germ, because your vaccine antibodies are suppressing your own antibodies from being generated. Kind of similar to what we were talking about earlier with the maternal immunization. Mom's antibodies are preventing the vaccine's antibodies from generating. Well, the acellular vaccine antibodies are preventing your own immune system from responding to future whooping cough infections. That's kind of doing the opposite it's supposed to do. Yeah. But I think what they're finding is the vaccine will still reduce possibly reduce the severity of the infection for you, so you won't feel as sick, but you will still get infected and go through repeated clinical infections with whooping cough, and even being even more susceptible to that the whole rest of your life, compared to kids who either were not vaccinated and had a natural infection at some point, or compared to kids who got the old whole cell vaccine. And so and
that's another example of something that'd be all over the news, right?
I know that should be. And Dr. Cherry came up with this. So everyone in the infectious disease world, they're probably rocked by this, and they're probably hoping no one's even hearing about this. And no one did. No one talked about this. And his answer is, if we just keep giving everyone acellular vaccines every few years, their entire life, we'll at least keep that artificial immunity there so they won't get severe disease.
Yeah, but God, could you imagine getting a Tdap every 2
It's still making you
3
susceptible
years?
to catching the infection.
Yeah, but gosh, just the risk profile alone for you the rest of your life to have to do it that often.
But even if you don't get repeated boosters, just getting the infant series makes you more susceptible the entire rest of your life. And his answer is to go back to using a whole cell vaccine that has some of the most reactive components taking out. His answer is a better vaccine, and everyone's working on a better vaccine. Yeah. But this vaccine we've been using the last 22 years, it's messing things up so badly that what is a different vaccine going to do? They're not going to know what they're doing. And I think, whooping cough, I think, is probably the prime example of we don't know what the heck we're doing with this particular vaccine. We're changing it. Yeah. It's causing problems.
It's causing darts everywhere.
Yeah, it's causing problems with the infection. The infection's coming back because the vaccine doesn't work well. So it's a big mess. And their answer is just keep doing it anyway. Well,
I know.
You, the educated public, can
just like the flu shot,
can make your own decision. Yeah, I love that post of that doctor complained about how the flu hit his family. They went to the ER. People are terribly sick.
Took Tamiflu.
Yeah, took Tamiflu. Gosh, I'm sure glad I got I got all of us the flu vaccine.
Who knows what would have happened?
That was his conclusion. Yeah. Thank God we got the flu vaccine.
Because who knows how bad it would have been. I'm thinking, to me, that sounds pretty bad. That's worst case scenario to have to go to urgent care or the ER for the flu. If you can't manage the flu at home, I'm sorry. That's worst case scenario. To think that that's best case scenario because you got the vaccine, what world are you living in?
Well, anyway, this was a pertussis update, and I think 2 very important studies that were kind of missed, and I wanted to highlight those, and so I think that you can share this information with the people who are pregnant, have young kids. They need to be aware of the drawbacks of getting the acellular pertussis vaccine, and now you guys know.
All right.
Anything else? You can keep talking.
We'll wrap it up because we have another episode to do. Right. And appreciate you guys so much. Keep up with those amazing reviews, by the way, even on the Immunity Education Facebook group. I love checking those out. Yep. And thank you guys for listening, and hope you enjoyed the vaccine conversation. Melissa and Dr. Bob. We're gonna be the peace we want to see in the world. Yeah, the peace we want to see in the world.
The information in this podcast is for entertainment purposes only. It is not intended as medical advice. Always consult your healthcare professional for information on vaccines and infectious diseases.